Hello my friends, William Poloniak here from Whole Health Foundation. Today I'm making a garden harvest juice and I'm using one of my favorite vegetables, French sorrel. But since I have so many ingredients, I'm not going to mention them, I'm going to show them to you. Let's take a look. Now here I have the French sorrel, carrots of course, 160 grams of turmeric, 80 grams of ginger, 1 whole clove of garlic, a handful of tomatoes, red cabbage, I have 1 huge beet, 3 cucumbers, 3 Anaheim chilies, about 6 zucchinis, and a half of another red cabbage. And we're going to start making juice. I'm going to start with my greens and then the rest of my vegetables. The first thing I want to point out is I'm using the front-loading feed tube that eliminates almost 100% of the blowback. What happens when vegetables shoot up is it hits this angle and bounces back and forth, and if it comes out, it only comes out an inch or two. And I'm also using the near zero blowback cutter that has over 80 teeth. Now the first thing I'll do is assemble the cutter. And I'm going to plug in my thermometer and feed in some ice cubes to cool down the cutter and the feed tube. The first step, as always, is to feed in 3 or 4 ice cubes. Even though you've got a front-loading feed tube that eliminates blowback, always keep this covered. And I'll start with French sorrel. Take a handful. I want to point out how fast that near zero blowback cutter shred greens, which are very difficult to shred. And I want to point out another thing. Because the near zero blowback cutter does such a good job on greens, you're going to be tempted to put in more greens than you should. Don't do that. Less greens is more effective. So take about a handful. Now here's the last of my French sorrel. I'm going to follow that by a few ice cubes. Now I'm going to clean my cutter and clean my grid, that is, and then check my cutter. Sometimes the cutter gets clogged up with fiber, sometimes it doesn't, depends on the produce. So let's put this grid back in, unplug the thermometer, and check the cutter. Well, it's got a little bit of fiber on it. Not much, but we'll clean it off. As long as we've got this apart, reassemble and continue. One of the things I love about wearing gloves is you can use it to mix your produce. Now I've had people say, oh, I never wear gloves. Well, you know, suit yourself. There's a lot of advantages to wearing gloves, the least of which is keeping your hands clean. So now I'll start with the rest of my produce, and I've got some Anaheim chilies here, so let's put those through first, and then some cucumbers. Now here's a cucumber. Next, I'm going to cut my red cabbage into manageable slices. And I'm going to do the same with this huge beet. So even though I'm going to shred the tops, I'll put the tops aside, I'm going to cut this beet into quarters so they'll go through the feed tube. And then the beets and the cabbage. Beets next. Notice how I'm keeping the feed tube covered even though I have a near zero blowback cutter and a front loading feed tube. Now I have 2 cucumbers and then I'll start my carrots. I'll continue with my carrots. Now here's a little tip for you. After you feed through your first few carrots, clean your grid because there's bound to be a residue of fiber from your greens. And let's continue with the rest of the carrots. Now I want to point out, because of all the greens we did, my bowl is very, very full and I still have a lot of carrots to do. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to mix this produce and then transfer it, some of it, into a container and then continue with my shredding of carrots. Alright, I'm going to use a, how many cups is this, a 4-cup? I'm going to use a 4-cup container to transfer this pulp to this other container so that I can continue with my carrots. There we go. Now we'll continue with the carrots. Now here's the last of my carrots. Last carrot. Now I want to point out one thing that I love about this front loading feed tube. You can see inside to see if all of your produce is shred. And I see a little plug of carrot there that needs shredding, so I'm going to put in some pulp and I'm going to force that wax plug through. And the next step is to clean the grid, the cutter, the feed tube, and mix my produce. Clean the carrot off the cutter and then out of the feed tube. Use a knife to do that. As I said, my next step is to mix the produce, and this is so full I'm going to have to be very, very careful spinning this bowl around so I don't spill any of this on the countertop. And I'm going to spin this in both directions to get a really good mix. And I'm starting with a new set of 6 cloths. I keep about 10 sets of 6 cloths on a shelf in my room. And these are a new set because the old set started squirting at me. So what I'm going to do now is put 3 scoops into each cloth, and I'm going to demonstrate my 6 cloth less work method. And we'll start by taking 1 cloth, fold it over, flatten it out, fold it over in thirds just like it came in the package. Little crease back here, pull this and tuck it under into as tight a package as possible. Set that aside. And the reason I'm setting it aside is I'm going to press 2 cloths full of pulp at the same time. That makes for better pressure and more juice from your produce. So again, over flatten it. These first 2 cloths are going to go into the press, centered left to right, make sure it's on the tray properly, centered front to back, adjust it if need be. You notice how I can reach in here and adjust it, all the way back it off a little bit. And we'll continue. This goes forward, that goes over, the spent cloths go on top. Centered left to right, centered front to back, all the way back it off. Now there's 2 methods. One is to put 2 scoops of pulp on top of the already spent pulp, as I'm doing here. And the other method is to take the spent pulp and put it back in the bowl where it's puddling. So we have a puddle in the bowl. I'm going to take this, crush it up, put it in the puddle. Put in 2 more scoops. And advance that all the way. 3 more scoops, because we put the pulp back in the bowl. So here's my 6 cloth method. This goes forward, this goes over, the spent cloths go on top, 2 cloths full of pulp into the press, centered left to right, centered front to back, all the way back it off a little bit. Now, because we had an excess of pulp for the size of my bowl, I'm going to dump this into my collection bowl and mix it again. And we'll wash these containers later and mix this right now. Now here's my less work 6 cloth method again. This goes forward, this goes over, the spent cloths go on top, 2 new cloths into the press, centered left to right, centered front to back, making the adjustments if need be, all the way back it off a little bit. Now the bowl's getting very, very full, so we're going to keep our eye on that bowl. Now, I'm going to put 2 scoops on top of the spent pulp. You never throw away your pulp until the very last. Because we're full, we're going to put this into bottles. And I'm setting this tray back a lot, not a little. If you set it back only a little to prevent this from dripping on your countertop, you're going to forget, believe me. Set it back a lot. Now let's put this into bottles. For me, the juice is too rich, and I like to add water, and if you're a diabetic, you may want to as well. There we go. Now let's make more juice. I'm down to my last 2 sets of cloths, and I have some spent pulp here. What I'm going to do now is package this into a tight package and show you how I can get 10% more juice using the Whole Health Foundation Premium Model Juicer. And that's because of this solid bottom plate, which enables you to leave your press up indefinitely. You could leave it up all day if you wanted to. Now watch my folding technique. I'm going to fold this under 2 or 3 or 4 or many times as I can in both directions. I'll flatten that, set it aside. Put 2 more cloths in here and continue repackaging these. Now, my friends, as you can see, I've repackaged all of the spent pulp into 3 double packets. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to use a measuring beaker to measure how much more juice we can get using the Whole Health Foundation Premium model. I'll flatten that as much as I can, put it in the tray. Now usually you can get 10 to 15% more juice, depending on the produce. Now you're going to center this left to right, center it front to back, all the way back, back it off a little bit, turn on your machine. Well, there's almost 6 ounces so far from the first set of cloths. So let's take these first 2 out and put another set in. Now there I've got 18, almost 19 ounces. I'm going to stop this now because my container is going to overflow. And I still have 2 packets to press. I've repackaged these a second time, so we'll see how much more juice we can get. Well, so far we've got another 5 ounces. So that's 24 total. Now your most valuable nutrients are in this last 10% of your pressing. There's another 6 ounces. So 25 more ounces by pressing the already spent pulp again. Well, my friends, as you can see, I have 5, 10, 15, 20 bottles and a little for a taste test. And remember, 2 of these bottles were from pressing the already spent pulp. And in these last 2 bottles is where the most valuable nutrition is. So let's do a taste test. Well, my friends, let's give it a taste test. Oh, this is delicious. I can definitely taste the French sorrel, which always sweetens up a juice. Well, my friends, I hope you like what you've seen. My garden harvest juice and the ingredients you saw at the earlier part of this video. If you like what you've seen, please tell a friend. If you'd like to phone me, my phone number is 760-753-0321. My email address is developtrust@cox.net, and my webpage is wholehealthfound.com. See you in the next video.